live. Today, we are following our programming. As yesterday, we covered tools and best practices and platforms for live streaming, especially looking at software, with something completely different and very poignant. I am streaming to you from Bergamo, Italy, which until today and for the past several weeks has been the global epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is not something that you would expect. We are taught that the perception that we are the center of the world is wrong, that the various Copernican revolutions teaching us that our place on the planet, in the solar system and in the universe is not special, is the right attitude. And yes, that is true in general. It is the right thing to put oneself in that kind of mindset, but sometimes it is not. Sometimes you are the superstar, the rock legend, or the movie star, the highest paid person in your industry, or the president of a country. And those are good things. Sometimes your special place is connotated by something pretty bad. When the COVID-19 epidemic started, or at least when it has been recognized as an epidemic with which an increasing number of people would have had to deal with, it was far from many of us. It was in China. It was in a region and a city that we have, most of us, never heard of. And many of us had a hard time even pronouncing Wuhan. And then we learned that it is a city of 15 million people in a region of 70 million people in a country of more than 1 billion, 1.4. Do they know how many? Are those counts, the Chinese census, reliable? Are the numbers of the epidemic reliable? Those were the first questions that we were asking ourselves. What is going on in the wet market? Animals commingling with humans. What is the source of this contagion and the virus that causes it? What is the virus? For some time, we didn't know. And while we were worried, we didn't believe that it could, over the course of a few weeks, go out of China in an increasing number of countries, and in fact, an increasing number of people. One of the reasons we didn't know is because we are not accustomed to dealing with phenomena that has this kind of explosive growth. I have been analyzing, studying, teaching, and implementing in my businesses what we call in the industry exponential technologies. And these have been for the good. An increasing computing power, an increasing ability to communicate with each other, an increasing ability to sense the world and act on our understanding of the world. There is a wonderful website, Our World in Data, that collects and illustrates how over the course of the past 50, 100, 200 years, the human condition radically improved thanks to technology, thanks to our ever-increasing understanding of how the universe works. The fact that the contagion due to what is now called COVID-19, the disease, and the virus itself, which is SARS-2-CoV, the fact that the diffusion of this contagion is non-linear was hard for most of the people to understand. And we were dearly in need of trying to understand it, because we tended to act always too late. Whether we are talking about the Chinese local government, the Chinese health care authorities, the Chinese central government, or almost every other country that has been involved in this ongoing disaster. The fact that we are not prepared to understand those numbers is important and fairly well understood in many circles, why that is the case. And today I don't want to get in too much detail about it, because tomorrow, actually, at the same time, 7 p.m. Central European time, and unless there is the summer savings time change tonight at 2 p.m. Eastern time and 11 a.m. Pacific time in the US, we are going to talk about exponential technologies, what they mean, how they impact the world, and how they can prepare us to act in the right manner, hopefully, under the conditions that we are seeing right now. If you want to make sure that you don't miss the next day of Searching for the Question live, then please subscribe to the various channels where it airs. You can look up David Orban everywhere, and even though there are other people named like me, in most of the places you will easily find me. And so you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, where there's a playlist for the Searching for the Question live videos.
The reason I am using Zoom is not because
the other playlist that you may want to check out is the context. The context has been ongoing for over a year on a weekly basis, and it covers many topics, trying to give you a deeper and broader reading of what is going on around us in a manner that hopefully you will appreciate. The context is still being produced, and I am planning to keep producing it in parallel with Searching for the Question live. And tomorrow's episode of the context is about collective intelligence. You can receive it already today if you join me as a supporter on Patreon, and you can interact at various levels in order to build together a better understanding of our world. So, as I said, it was very hard for me to realize that Bergamo, where I have a beautiful home, a wife, and in the area two of my three children are still living, that Bergamo would become the epicenter of this global pandemic. But that is what happened. You see here a photo of me with a face mask. Wear one. Don't omit wearing one, please. And yes, obviously I should cut my beard. The face mask is less effective, radically so, with a beard because it is not adhering to my mouth with the degree that it could without all that facial hair. Now, an important comment on everything that I will be saying. I am not a medical professional. I am not an epidemiologist. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not an economist. I'm not a politician or policymaker. I am not a lot of things. So please, everything I say, be extremely skeptical, healthily so. Check out what you hear, going to the source, going to professional sources, to the health professionals, to the epidemiologists that are collating information and publishing information at a rate that it's actually hard to absorb. Luckily, and I'm happy to know that most of the information is freely available, meaning that even those scientific publications that typically lock away their articles behind paywalls, with each article costing $10, $20, $30, $40, $50, $60 at subscription rates that even the richest universities are having a hard time to be able to afford. These days, it is possible to get the articles about COVID-19 and the coronavirus pandemic for free on places like Lancet and the New York Times and other places where you can go and know that the information is thoroughly checked. It may still be wrong. It may still contain mistakes, but it will be honestly analyzed, and if mistakes are found, it will be updated. And the way that you are looking at me and whatever I say skeptically, that should guide you in other things that you are also looking at. This image that you are seeing is an easy reference, not only for journalists that will be reporting and commenting and analyzing the pandemic day after day for a long time. But if you look at it and you understand the guidelines described in this list of how to report responsibly on COVID-19, you will be able to use it as a checklist. Is this article, is this reporting worthy of my attention, worthy of being shared on social media, for example? In Bergamo, I have a wonderful home. I am lucky. And the social infrastructure is strong, even though we cannot today hug each other and kiss each other on the cheek and have a cappuccino in the morning with a croissant, as Italians do. People are expressing their strong belief that the social structure will hold. In the local dialect, Bergamola mia, I cannot actually speak the local dialect. I speak a good Italian, but most of the time people ask me if I'm a foreigner because I don't have a regional accent. And here in the Bergamo region, everybody speaks the Bergamo dialect, which is practically a language with its own vocabulary, grammar, and I cannot even understand it. So Bergamola mia means Bergamo doesn't give up. Andrà tutto bene. Everything will be fine. For the moment, everything is not fine. I first saw the things that were described in China as during the lockdown, as it was starting right here and then rapidly extended to the entire country of 60 million people, all of Italy. The streets would be completely empty, no traffic, total silence. And with the spring coming, you would only see the birds, hear the birds singing, and the sirens of ambulances bringing the people who are ill into the hospitals, getting ever more crowded and filled, even in their most important units, where the people who are the illest or the most ill can be cared for. But even before this lockdown happened, I was on the verge to actually hop on a plane to go to South Korea, where my daughter is. After turning 20, she told us that she was moving there, and she did in November, just 4 months before the pandemic hit South Korea and Seoul, where she resides. And I was really worried about her, especially because he developed a fever and she was coughing. And it could have been, and maybe it was, just the seasonal flu or a cold, but we didn't know. And I was able to do the rational thing, and I was able not to hop on a plane and not to go, because if she were ill, I would get infected. If she wasn't, she would be fine. And besides, as I landed, probably I would have been put in an isolation room for 2 weeks in a quarantine, and would have served very little purpose. So I didn't go. She felt better. And then the lockdown happened all over Italy. Just the other day, my other son had his birthday. So as many of you are doing these days, we had to gather around a group video call and sing happy birthday, since we couldn't be together. As you go shopping, people are very disciplinedly queuing for half an hour, an hour and a half, even before being able to enter into the supermarket. 2 meters, 6 feet between each other, waiting their turn, because the supermarket is not allowed by law admitting more than a given number of people, depending on their surface area. But what was really hard happened a few days after, just a couple of days ago. Because we knew that the situation was difficult, we realized that a lot of people were getting sick. We realized that these numbers that were being reported of thousands and then tens of thousands, and soon we will be at 100,000 people infected, proportionally meant that about 20% of them would need to be hospitalized, and a proportion of those hospitalized would need to be put in the intensive care units, which are limited in number. And if an intensive care bed is occupied by somebody that is ill with COVID-19, he or she will be there for at least a couple of weeks. And that bed cannot accommodate another person. And the ventilator or the respirator or the intubation process that allows that person to keep breathing while his or her body is fighting the infection and the pneumonia that goes with it, may be ill with other things as well. And if the bed is occupied, the person needing the respirator and the ventilator is not going to get it. And that person is going to die. And there is now a situation in Bergamo and in Lombardy in general, where the lethality that is going to be calculated at the end of the pandemic, when we will know all the data and we will say, these are the number of people who got ill, independently of how many got infected, because we will never know the exact number of the people infected. And out of those who got ill, this is the proportion that died. And then we will say it was bad, very bad, or catastrophic. Believe me, we will not say it was just like a flu. But that is then. What is happening now is that we are not able to even attempt to cure those who are ill, because the doctors, the nurses, the assistants, the infrastructure, the hospitals, the beds, everything is saturated and oversaturated. This has been made incredibly powerfully clear through photographs that started circulating a couple of days ago. This photo that you are seeing is the entrance to the Bergamo hospital, where ambulances are queuing up. There are so many that are bringing people. And what happens when those people cannot be treated is that they die. There are so many of them dying that they are now collecting and piling up the dead people in the churches, because the places where they are kept regularly are not enough anymore. And this was the hardest. A convoy of military trucks, 60, 70 military trucks in nighttime, taking the dead to be cremated in other regions, because not even the cremation process can hold up. You can go to the source here as well. These images are from La Repubblica, one of the leading Italian daily newspapers, and you can use Google Translate to read it in English very easily and to understand what is going on. The numbers are very different from what you are hearing. In China, the fatality rate has been reported to be about 3%, 3.4% if I'm not mistaken. Fine, great. Not great because it's 30 times, 30 times more than the fatality rate of a seasonal flu. But in Lombardy, not if you get the coronavirus, not if you get sick, but if you have to go to the hospital, right now, 33% fatality rate. 1/3 of the people who go in a hospital don't come out, if not dead. And that has a lot of different kinds of implications. A few days ago, I happened to tune in on some platform, I barely remember which, when Bertrand Torsten, a Brooklyn-based author, speaker, very funny comedian, but also a very smart guy, started his own live stream. And I hooked up with the live stream because he was showing a very heartbreaking image and video of somebody leafing through the local newspaper, and the number of people dead was occupying 10 pages being listed in the newspaper. So we did a little impromptu interview that was picked up by Now This. And Now This has quite a few followers. It has 14 million followers on Facebook, and millions of others on Twitter and Instagram. And I am very glad that they shared this because I wanted to really send a message that the United States, whose turn unfortunately is now to become the epicenter, must take this very, very seriously. And I had the impression 2-3 days ago that it wasn't happening. I still believe that it is not happening at a degree that it must. Let's watch the interview with Bertrand Torsten as edited and published by Now This together. If you have a good chance of surviving, then you get the intensive care. If not, you're gonna die. Realism, please, is more important than hope. The US runs the risk of being hit even harder because of the delay of the measures. The fact that schools are not being closed, the fact that people who should stay home don't stay home because they are afraid of losing their jobs, so they go to work even if they are sick, is a premise for infections that are going to explode.
To me, it sounds like what we've been reading is true. So it sounds like a war type situation, which is not very good. Do you have any sense of how long you're going to be in this kind of hold pattern in terms of staying in your home?
The government imposed lockdown about 10 days ago, maybe a little less, and it should officially last for another 10 days, but it is practically sure that they will renew the measures. What people have been afraid of the health care system being overrun by everybody being sick, is what is happening here, so that there are not enough intensive care beds. And whether you have the coronavirus or you have a stroke, there is a competition for who gets cured. And the doctors have to decide, if you have a good chance of surviving, then you get the intensive care. If not, you're going to die. Every day that extreme measures are imposed increases the number of sick people who are running the risk of dying, and the difference of the fatality rate between what is in South Korea, for example, and what we are seeing in Italy, and what is going to be in the US, is how quickly the measures have been put in place. So hoping is not going to make it. Everybody individually should self-impose the measures. If the government is not smart enough to tell people what they should do, the smart people should do it by themselves. Don't mix up with others. Don't go to the restaurants. Don't go to the pubs. Don't go to concerts. 500 people or more is ridiculous. 5 people or more shouldn't happen. So the reason I wanted you to watch this very well prepared video is because it really drives the point home, I hope. And in the video, I remarked that hope is not enough. The point there was that we have to act. We have to be proactive, and we have to be able to mentally and rationally double check, are the things that we are doing the right things that are going to lead to outcomes that we are happy with. If you stay home, you are not going to get sick. If you are infected with the virus, you are not going to infect others. If you get sick at home and everybody else is at home as well, then the likelihood that you will be able to get the help you need from a local hospital is much higher than if irresponsibly we increase the infection rate and, as a consequence, the proportion of people who are sick. The interesting part, in my opinion, and we will talk more about this in future days of searching for the question live, is that the opportunity to learn is there. Italy wasn't able to learn from the example of South Korea. In South Korea, there is an enormous amount of testing going on and an enormous amount of tracking and tracing those who are positive, who did they come in contact with? In Italy, unfortunately, even though at the beginning it appeared that testing was being done in large enough numbers, it turned out that wasn't the case. And look at the difference. This is from an Italian newspaper, but you can see from the beginning of the infection, the total number of cases in Korea was kept under control, less than 10,000 cases. Why, if at the beginning they were tracking each other, in Italy the cases exploded. And there are other countries that did even better than Korea. Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong could have had tens or hundreds of thousands of people infected, but they didn't, because they were able to put in place what they learned from 10 years ago when they were facing the SARS epidemic, and they had emergency plans, testing facilities, digital applications for tracking people, and they use them. This chart shows you from day zero of the infection, what happens in the various countries. And you see that all of them go in the same direction. The chart, by the way, is a logarithmic chart, means that the vertical axis represents orders of magnitude. 500, 5,000, 50,000, rather than 500, 600, 700, right? So going from a given position to another one, if on day 5 there are 500 cases here, and on day 10 we are twice high, it means there are 5,000 cases. And as in Italy, on day 20, we have 50,000 cases, more or less. And you may notice that the slope of this line, on which the US appears to be, is even steeper. You see that it is shooting up and is running the risk of becoming very rapidly the country with the most new cases on a daily basis, and then shortly after with the most cases overall. Now, interestingly, the way that we can look at this data, and there are a lot of people who are looking at the data, can show us other things as well. As you plot the numbers, you can actually slide the numbers so that independently from the date, you understand what is going on and what is going to be going on. Because if for 7 days in a given country, the numbers have gotten high, and in another country in 7 days, the numbers get that high, the likelihood is that it will continue. That is why there's no reason to be complacent. You have to act in order to be able to intervene, like Hong Kong and Singapore and Japan and also Taiwan intervened, or at least as South Korea intervened. And as we try to understand what are the things that help, a lot of people are thinking, is it the fact that there is almost universal use of masks in Japan and Singapore and Hong Kong also a reason? So we will go back to talk about many things concerning the COVID-19 pandemic. And I know that there will be a lot of things to talk about. I want to thank those of you that joined the stream and sent questions or remarks on Facebook or on other platforms. And I want to invite you to keep doing that. We struggle, and the psychological impact of the struggle is something that you must not underestimate. It is natural to struggle. I like this image for geeks and nerds. It says that from birth to death, through time, you struggle, and that is what life is, in a quite nice mathematical formula of an integral. I like it. This is my wife, Diana, when we met, and this is us, some 30 plus years later, in Cuba, actually. And I'm sure that you have people that you care about, that you want to make sure that can weather the storm. That is why you want to be smart. For yourself, yes, but mostly for the others. So I want to end today's live stream with a funny note, poking fun at conspiracy theorists. I found this image on Facebook. I don't know the original source. It says, "Oh, you are just a puppet. The government controls you, which is in turn controlled by mainstream media. And the mainstream media is controlled by the financial establishment. In turn, the puppeteers of the Illuminati control the financial establishment, but of course the aliens control the Illuminati. And we just learned that the toilet paper producers control everything." So I hope that made you laugh a little bit. Tomorrow, at the same time, searching for the question live, please join again on all the platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and we will be introducing more platforms as they become available to be captured or interfaced in the setup that I'm using. And tomorrow we are going to talk about exponential technologies and jolting technologies, those whose rate of acceleration is increasing. You can support the live stream as well as the context, my weekly video, by becoming a supporter on Patreon. And if you invested an hour almost of your life watching this video, it probably means that you like what you hear. And you can express that in many, many different ways. And a good way of expressing it is to become a supporter on Patreon. There is a suggested sum of $5 a month, and you can pick that or lesser or larger sums as well. Thank you, and see you tomorrow.